Kendall Kaut covers men's basketball, not as much as he used to, but he covers it. He follows it. He put something up in the forums the other day that was about certain years following the game. Good to see you, my friend. Craig and Paul with me as well. So they've already played a couple of games. Colorado just knocked out TCU, and Oklahoma State was buried by Cincinnati. Who would you say, or is there a dark horse entering the games tonight into the next 2 days, into the weekend of the Big 12?
Always good to be on with you, Smokey, Craig, and Paul. I don't know that anybody today, Smokey, sticks out as a dark horse. Maybe if you wanted to make an argument, and why the heck not? We'll make an argument. We got video on 365 radio now. The haters said it would never happen, and here we are with a great show on radio. So I believe y'all have done it. I'm excited. I think maybe K-State could make a run. Coleman Hawkins has been a little bit banged up. If he can be a little bit healthier than he was, the Wildcats in January had a run where they were a top 10 team by a lot of advanced metrics in that month. They're probably the team that could be most likely to do that. Cincinnati shot really poorly all season. Maybe they can get hot from the field. But I think there is a pretty big gap between the top 8 teams in the Big 12. And then when you go to 9 to 16, you start thinking these teams don't really have a shot. This league probably didn't need to have 16 teams all make its conference tournament.
Kendall, Houston is a juggernaut. Iowa State, when healthy, can be a juggernaut. Arizona has been very good in the conference, and Tech has been very good. Do you think that anybody like Kansas, they've got a good big man. That usually works out well in the tournament. Who else could reasonably get hot here?
I think that is the full list, Paul. I think there is a chance that KU could be a little better than they've been during the regular season. That probably starts with KU stopping to play AJ Storr. Been maybe the most disappointing transfer in the history of the portal. Dominant player at Wisconsin, has seemingly lost the ability to shoot. A turnover maven in Lawrence. So I think KU might be a little bit more comfortable with the lineup that it has. Played very well on senior day against Arizona. So that's probably the extent of the reach, but I'd be pretty shocked if you go down to the Baylor, who's fighting for its life on the bubble, and those other teams. I'd be pretty surprised if anybody in that run could make a run in the dance.
Kendall, about those Baylor Bears, man, been a tough year, been a weird ride at times. How would you summarize what you've seen from your, I guess, expectations to just your surprises and where they now find themselves?
Sure. Craig, I think clearly expectations were not met this season. Whether that starts with Jeremy Roach expected to be an all Big 12 caliber player, now is not even good enough to start for the Baylor Bears. Whether that's the injuries they've had this season, Langston Love having to grind it out, Jaden Nunn's three-point shooting not being what it is against good opponents compared to how dominant he is against those sub-150 teams. So I think other than VJ Edgecombe, who's been absolutely amazing defensively and offensively, and how hard Norchad Omier has played, there really isn't anything else that's hit for the Bears this season. Rob Wright's been good, but I thought he would be good. And since the Kansas game, I think he's kind of hit a freshman wall. So everything can still turn around for Baylor in these last couple of weeks of the season. But I don't think even the biggest Baylor hater expected the Bears to be fighting for their NCAA tournament lives heading into the final week of postseason play before the NCAA tournament.
How did they get here? How did they get to that point?
Smokey, I think it was several things. Number one, I think they overestimated the ability of Jeremy Roach to come in from shooting guard to point guard, which set them back. Second, I think Baylor overlearned a little bit of a lesson from how dominant its guards were in the era of Davion Mitchell, Jared Butler, Maceo Teague, Adam Flagler, and just assumed, well, if we have dominant freshmen with them, we can plug and play guys, and that hasn't worked out. I think Baylor's biggest mistake, Smokey, has been that wing talent has not been there the last several seasons. When you really look at the 3 Baylor teams that have underachieved in the last 12 years, the 2013 team led by A.J. Walton with Pierre Jackson's final season, the 2018 team that doesn't make the tournament with Manu LeConte and Joe Lual Achuil, and now this team, that one through line for all of those teams, they didn't have good 6'6" to 6'9" players that could go out and get you 10 points in a game. That 2013 team kind of screwed by Quincy Miller changing his mind on coming back. The 2018 team not having anybody besides Nooni Omot who could play the wing. And then this year's team relying upon really no wings, with maybe the exception of Jalen Celestine, who's not really quality enough coming from Cal to be a dominant scorer. So I think Baylor needs to recruit more guys in that 6'6" to 6'9" range who can go out on the perimeter, hit a shot, and score. They didn't have to have that when you had maybe the greatest guard trio in the 21st century, but you've got to have that to win when you're not going to hit on recruits like they did with Jared Davion and Maceo, and you can't develop guys because there's no sit-out year like the Bears had when they were able to develop Teague and Mitchell so well.
Yeah, Kendall, one day I'll have to tell you the full story about how after Quincy made that announcement, I was announcing he was at a baseball game. I was the PA announcer. I rode down in the elevator with him and Scott, and I don't know if you remember the scene from Jerry Maguire when he's getting married and, like, the video, he rubs his eyes. Like, that was the same vibe. Like, Quincy was like, I think I don't want to do this. Now, if I had told you, like, if I had, we were sitting down, crystal ball, and I was reading your palm, and I said, Kendall, the entire Bears season will revolve around the health of Josh Ojenwuna, would you have told me, like, no, you're a charlatan, give me my money back?
That's far.
So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far? Or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
I'm hearing far.
Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness.
I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
I would have said, Paul, you're a charlatan. I would like the money. I have just paid you back indeed. It shouldn't have come down to that. And the fact it did, I think, also speaks to Baylor. We knew coming into the season was rolling the dice a little bit by only having 2 playable big men. Well, they rolled the dice. They came up short there. That's going to happen sometimes. But I think the inability to get more wings and to think they could plug and play Jeremy Roach when he's not Ray J. Dennis at Duke because he hadn't been the point guard before was also a risk. Langston Love's health was a risk. I think if you simulate that season 100 times, Baylor probably doesn't have all of that collection of injuries. Jeremy Roach maybe puts it together a little bit better earlier in the season. Maybe Jaden Nunn hits a few more shots. But when you look at how bad this season has gone relative to where Baylor is as a program, this may be about the worst it could be, but that also probably speaks to Baylor was never a serious national title contender coming into the season.
Kendall, I'm sure you've seen on the boards the talk about the one and dones, and we need to go back to the championship team. Like, that championship team was so unique. You can't just construct it that way. But VJ Edgecombe's awesome. Like, he's going to be another guy in the NBA. Like, where do you sit on that balancing act of having those types of stars, but also having the type of team that actually can go and win in March?
Yep, Craig, I think the one and dones are good for Baylor, and I don't think that's been the problem the last 3 seasons. The really, I think, kind of best cases you mentioned that people have made on the boards and is you're presenting that viewpoint, Craig, would be, okay, it costs quite a bit of money to bring in a VJ Edgecombe. Jacoby Walter cost quite a bit of money. Keontae was in that pre-era, but would have cost a lot of money now. Mm-hmm. Can you more evenly distribute that money and get some more talent? I don't think so, right? Imagine this Baylor team without VJ Edgecombe replaced by a 3-star guy who's going to develop. Baylor would not even be talking about going to the NIT or this new Vegas Big 12 thing. It would be talking about losing the 13-seeded game today or the 14-seeded game today. That's not the problem. I think a really talented one-and-done is still worth the money. As VJ Edgecombe showed, they can still play defense. As Cooper Flagg shows at Duke, you get a dominant guy. That can work out quite well for a program. The real issue, I think, for the Bears is how they've landed transfer players that have not hit quite so well. And then the guys they chose to rely upon were not quite so reliable this season. And that's just going to happen sometimes. I mean, Mizzou went from 0-18 to the SEC last year to potentially a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament this season. I think, unlike what some people are saying, where it's just, oh, you got to keep your guys and let them develop. If you know somebody's not the guy right now, you got to end it quickly, right? It's like if you're on a first date and somebody starts telling you crazy conspiracy theories and then asks, like, they got the Capitol Grill. Smokey and I went to in Indianapolis.
Yep.
If somebody goes out there and says, hey, can you bring me a Pizza Hut pizza? You don't need to wait the rest of the lunch to find out if that's going to develop into something, or say, well, let's get a second and third lunch and see if this guy's a little less crazy. You shut it down there. And I think Baylor probably has to get a little bit more transactional. And I think culture-wise, Baylor has to decide, is joy really even still the motto, or is the motto going to be something like, hard work, or what's it going to be? But I think this is a great opportunity for Baylor to re-examine what its values are, what its culture will be, and come back on the other side. But I think that will definitely include still recruiting and utilizing one-and-dones.
Grant McCasland, fight, scratch, and claw. That's been his style. But there's talent. His Toppin is fantastic, and Williams and others. But he is just a guy. Look at what he did at junior college. Look what he did with Scott as an assistant, and what he did at North Texas. Your thoughts about, did you see him as a star this quickly when you got to know him when you covered Baylor?
So Smokey, I don't know him super well on a personal level, but I do know their video coordinator, Chris Nottingham, super well on a personal level. He's always spoken very highly of Grant. Ashley Hodge, obviously a great friend of the site, as one of the owners of Sigma 365, and also a frequent radio guest, spoke very highly of Grant McCasland. I think there was a really good chance if Scott had left for Kentucky, he would have been the head coach. I didn't know he'd be this good this soon. I think his incredible talent is identifying guys that are underlooked at every level and going out and getting the dudes that fit his vision, whether that's in junior college, as you mentioned, winning an NCAA tournament game at UNT, which was not an easy thing, especially back then. And now this season playing so well with Texas Tech. So I think he's just a great program builder, a very smart guy. I think Scott will be around a while, but I think he's definitely probably the top of Mack Rhoades' list if Scott ever decided he wanted to step away. But I don't think that's going to happen this season. I think he's kind of rejuvenated by what's happened this year to prove people wrong and really get it going.
You stir up the Tech fans.
Kendall,
Some of them already stirred up just because.
Kendall, does Houston surprise you? Like, we've talked about it. We expected them to have like a drop off of like record. Didn't think they would be bad, but they've not. Like, it might as well. They're still playing in the AAC record wise. They just don't lose games. It's ridiculous.
Paul, Houston has definitely been an excellent team. Their 19-1 record this season, absolutely dominant. Big 12 was down a step, but even down a step going 19-1. And frankly, Houston was closer to going 20-0 than it was to going 16-4. The challenge, though, for Houston, I think, continues to be sort of like the old Oakland Athletics under Billy Beane in the height of the Moneyball era. Is there something about the way Houston plays that just will not translate to the postseason? There is a difference between how Houston defends and looks to attack and has a little bit more talent than West Virginia. But it seemed like all those press Virginia Bob Huggins teams would be so dominant in Big 12 play. Then on one night in the tournament, whether it was Stephen F. Austin for Bob Huggins that one season or some of the other seasons, you find one ref who doesn't quite officiate so many Big 12 games that, Terrence Oglesby, Marcus Pettigrew, Kip Kissinger, who's always in Waco now, Doug Sermons. If you don't have at least one of those guys on the crew and you're Houston in a Sweet 16 game, I would get a little bit worried about if suddenly you find yourself with 5 fouls 5 minutes into the ball game. And so that's probably my worry for Houston if I'm a Cougars fan is, does the NCAA tournament get called differently? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. It's had them in an opportunity to succeed. Maybe if 2021 doesn't feature one of the best teams of all time in Baylor, the Cougars could contend for a national championship that season since they made the Final Four. But I think that's their final test is there's something about the way Houston plays in the regular season that allows complete dominance that leads to negative results when it comes to the end. I think Kelvin Sampson's a phenomenal coach, and he might adjust. That's what happens. I think they're a good team, but I would probably put them a tier below Auburn and Duke, although some people put them in that same threshold. I think, once again, Houston's probably going to get called for a few fouls it thinks are weak and cheap fouls, but I think that style lends itself to a referee opining a little bit differently than someone might in, Provo in January.
L.J. Cryer had a phenomenal year. It was fantastic late Saturday night in Waco. Part of that national championship team. I hated that he ended up moving on just because I enjoyed watching him as he's the next guy, although with some of the new stars, as you mentioned, the young freshman phenoms that came in. Your thoughts about his overall career? He's been a part of 4 consecutive Big 12 championships, maybe 5 consecutive Big 12 championships.
He is an excellent player, Smokey. I've gotten into it a couple times with his mom on Twitter about LJ's time in Waco. She was not happy when I mentioned, he's not a rotation player at Baylor that first season because he wasn't, right? He was the 9th guy. Baylor played 8 guys in the tournament. That's what happened. But he had a phenomenal career. I think he was served well by going to Houston because he got the opportunity to not be angry about, any slights he felt like had happened at Baylor. Him and Scott, I think, still have a good relationship based on their embrace after the game. I think if he'd stayed in Waco, he would have had an opportunity to be a point guard that might have turned out differently. But he's one of the 15 best players in the country. People that think I'm a Houston hater would say he's even higher than that. One of the Big 12's best guys. I think I easily would have voted him as one of the top 5 guys, even if the Big 12 still listed 5 guys on the first team. An electric shooter, somebody who was always a very nice human being. I never heard anybody say he was a mean guy to any of his teammates. But you do wonder if he had stayed in Waco, how might that have turned out? Would Baylor be a much better team this year? Almost assuredly. But he'll have an opportunity to win a national championship. He got to go back home to Houston since he's from Katy, Texas. So I think LJ's very happy. I think his family's very happy. And I always appreciated the time he gave me when he was in Waco, although obviously his mom and I have gotten sideways on Twitter a couple of times.
Kendall, that's a common occurrence for you, though.
Yeah, L.J. Cryer's mother, Oklahoma, the state. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised, like, when you drive down here from Kansas City that, like, they don't pull you over in Oklahoma and just trump up charges on you, you know. Like, I didn't like, that just so bad. Is there a team, like, that you can see, like, the SEC is so good and so deep. Do you see that Houston could be a team that could make a run and beat two of those teams? Or is the SEC so deep that it might be fait accompli when it comes to that team getting a couple teams in the Final Four?
I think it would be pretty disappointing, Paul, for the SEC to not get a couple teams. Auburn is so good, although they've lost a couple lately. Alabama maybe is at some risk. That's probably the one seed I would most want to play, not because they're bad, but they're going to shoot 43s. You might get a game where they miss 32 of them. But between those teams, Tennessee's defense being so good, Florida might be as talented as any of those teams. Then you have the Aggies hanging around just a tier lower, but still probably in that 3-seed range. Mizzou's a potential sleeper. And then Ole Miss, Mississippi State. So many others will make the NCAA tournament that I do think the SEC will have two teams playing on the final weekend of the season.
Kendall, the Big 12 last year had a really good season. You know that. And then they really just flailed when they got to the tournament. What do they have to do this year? What do they need to do to kind of reestablish themselves? Still is among the best, but they're not. They lost a little luster with the tournament. Not only if the tournament should be the over end all, but it isn't football, the championship. It isn't basketball with the tournament.
Smokey, I really think the only way the Big 12 can put itself in that conversation this season would honestly be to win the national championship. I think this was clearly a down year for the conference when Baylor and KU are probably your two best programs along with Houston, and those two have clearly down years relative to the programs and the coaches they have. It really hurts your league, much like the Big 12 would say when Texas and OU weren't winning in football all the time. Well, is the league down if those two aren't winning? When KU and Baylor are down, Houston really has to carry this league. So I think if the Cougars can win the national championship, or if maybe Iowa State could shock people and get healthy, or if Texas Tech could make a real run to the national championship, that might do something. But I think ultimately, minus Houston winning the national championship, the Big 12 will probably take a lot of flack this offseason, and some of that will be deservedly so. But with so many good coaches, there's always next year, at least with those teams in basketball.
All right. Anything else, guys? Paul, Craig, Kendall, thank you. Good to see you, my friend. Kendall Kaut covers Big 12 basketball, covers college basketball, does a great job of it